Mariana Santos had always played by the rules. At 32, she had everything that looked perfect on paper. A successful career as a corporate attorney at one of the city's top law firms. A beautiful home in the suburbs. A husband named David who was kind, stable, and dependable. Her life was organized, predictable, and safe. But somewhere along the way, she'd stopped feeling alive. It was a Thursday evening in late September when everything started to shift. Her college friend Elena had been calling her for weeks, practically begging her to come out for just one evening. "You work too much," Elena kept saying. "When was the last time you did something just for fun?" "Just one night, Mariana." "Come on." Finally, Mariana agreed. She told David she was meeting Elena for dinner and left the house wearing a simple black dress she'd bought years ago but never worn. Something about the evening felt different from the moment she stepped outside. The air was crisp and the city lights seemed brighter than usual. Elena took her to a place called the Velvet Room. It wasn't the kind of restaurant Mariana usually visited. This was an upscale lounge with amber lighting that made everything feel warm and mysterious. Jazz music played softly in the background. People sat in shadowed corners, talking in low voices, laughing easily. The whole place had an atmosphere that felt alive. Mariana felt out of place immediately. She was used to conference rooms and court hearings, not places like this where people seem so relaxed and free. She clutched her purse a little tighter and followed Elena to the bar. "Relax," Elena said, ordering them both cocktails. "You look like you're about to give a presentation to the board. We're just here to have fun." But Mariana didn't know how to relax anymore. She'd forgotten how. For the past 7 years, her life had been about responsibilities and schedules. Wake up at 6, exercise, work until 7 or 8. Come home, make dinner, watch television with David, sleep, repeat. When was the last time she'd done something spontaneous? When was the last time she'd felt excited about anything? She was thinking about this when she noticed him across the bar. He was tall, probably in his late 30s or early 40s, with dark hair that had just a touch of gray at the temples. He wore a navy blazer that looked expensive but casual, and he was talking to the bartender like they were old friends. There was something about the way he moved, the way he smiled, that caught her attention, and then he looked directly at her. Their eyes met for just a moment, maybe 3 seconds. But in those 3 seconds, Mariana felt something she hadn't felt in years. Her heart actually skipped. Her breath caught. It was like being shocked awake from a long sleep. She looked away quickly, her cheeks burning. Elena was talking about something that happened at work, but Mariana couldn't focus on the words. She could feel him still looking at her even though she wasn't looking back. "Earth to Mariana," Elena said, waving her hand. "Are you even listening to me?" "Sorry, yes, I'm listening," Mariana lied, taking a sip of her drink. 20 minutes later, the bartender came over with 2 fresh cocktails. "These are from the gentleman at the end of the bar," he said, nodding toward the man with the salt and pepper hair. Elena grinned. Well, looks like someone's got an admirer." Mariana's stomach flipped. "I'm married," she said automatically, even though no one had asked. "So?" "He just bought you a drink. It's not a marriage proposal. Just say thank you like a normal person." The man walked over and Mariana's heart started racing again. Up close, he was even more striking. He had these dark eyes that seemed to see right through her. "I hope you don't mind," he said, his voice smooth and confident. "I noticed you looked like you could use a drink and I couldn't resist." "I'm Adrian." "Mariana," she heard herself say. "And this is my friend Elena." They talked for what felt like 5 minutes but was actually nearly an hour. Adrian was an art dealer, he told them. He traveled constantly, buying and selling paintings for private collectors. He just returned from Paris and was leaving for Tokyo in a few days. He talked about art and travel and life with this passion that Mariana found mesmerizing. He asked her questions too, real questions, and actually listened to her answers. When was the last time anyone had really listened to her? David certainly didn't anymore. Their conversations had become transactional. "Did you pick up the dry cleaning? What time is your meeting tomorrow? Should we visit your parents this weekend?" They talked at each other, not to each other, but Adrian asked her about her work, about what made her want to become a lawyer, about what she did for fun. And when she admitted she didn't really do anything for fun anymore, he looked at her with something like concern. "That's a shame," he said. "Life's too short to forget how to enjoy it." When Elena excused herself to take a phone call, Adrian pulled out a business card and handed it to Mariana. His fingers brushed hers for just a second, and she felt that electric shock again. "If you ever want to talk about art," he said, "or anything else, give me a call." Mariana took the card, knowing she shouldn't. "I'm married," she said again, like a warning to herself as much as to him. "I know," Adrian said, glancing at her wedding ring. "I just think it would be nice to talk to you again. As friends. That was safe, wasn't it? What was wrong with having friends?" She put the card in her purse. The drive home felt longer than usual. Elena kept talking about how handsome Adrian was, how charming, how Mariana should be careful because men like that were dangerous. But Mariana barely heard her. She was thinking about the way Adrian had looked at her. Like she was interesting. Like she mattered. When she got home, David was already asleep on the couch, the television still on. She looked at him for a long moment. He was a good man. He worked hard, paid the bills, never forgot her birthday. He was reliable and steady and safe. Safe. That word kept echoing in her head as she got ready for bed. When had safe started feeling like a cage? She took Adrian's business card out of her purse and held it under the bathroom light. The letters were embossed, elegant. She ran her thumb over his name. Adrian Castillo. Art dealer. She should throw it away. She knew that. She was a married woman. She had no business keeping some strange man's phone number, but instead she tucked the card into her wallet, behind her driver's license where David would never see it. For the next 3 days, Mariana couldn't stop thinking about that evening at the Velvet Room. She would be in the middle of reviewing a contract and suddenly remember the way Adrian smiled. She would be having dinner with David and find herself wondering what Adrian was doing. Was he already in Tokyo? Was he thinking about her too? She told herself it was harmless. She wasn't going to call him. She was just curious. That was all. But late Wednesday night, after David had gone to bed and she was sitting alone in the kitchen with a glass of wine, she found herself pulling out her phone. Her hands were shaking slightly as she typed in the number from Adrian's card. She stared at the screen for a long time. Her finger hovered over the call button. This was crazy. She was being ridiculous. She should delete the number and forget about the whole thing. But then she thought about the rest of her life stretching ahead of her. The same routine day after day, year after year. The same conversations. The same safe, predictable existence. And before she could talk herself out of it, she pressed call. The phone rang 3 times before Adrian answered. His voice was slightly sleepy and Mariana immediately felt foolish. She glanced at the clock. It was after 11. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't realize how late it was. I should let you go, Mariana." Adrian sounded more awake now and pleased. "No, don't apologize. I'm glad you called. I was hoping you would." They talked for 2 hours that first night. Mariana sat in her darkened kitchen, speaking in hushed tones so she wouldn't wake David upstairs, and told Adrian things she hadn't told anyone in years. About how she'd wanted to be a painter before law school, about how her parents had convinced her that art wasn't a real career, about how somewhere along the way she'd stopped recognizing herself. Adrian listened without judgment. He told her about his own life, about growing up poor and discovering art in a library book, about deciding to live on his own terms, even when it meant taking risks, about learning that regret for things you didn't do hurt worse than any failure. When she finally hung up, the sun was starting to rise. She had a meeting at 8 and hadn't slept at all, but she felt more awake than she had in years. The calls became regular. Every few nights after David went to sleep, Mariana would slip downstairs and call Adrian. They talked about everything and nothing. Books, movies, childhood memories, dreams they'd given up on. He made her laugh in a way she'd forgotten was possible. "We should meet for coffee," Adrian said one evening. "Actually talk face to face instead of through a phone." Mariana's heart raced. "I don't know if that's a good idea." "Why not? We're friends, aren't we? Friends have coffee." "Friends," Mariana repeated, testing the word. Was that what they were? "There's a gallery opening on Friday," Adrian continued. "Nothing fancy. Just local artists. Come with me. You said you used to paint. Maybe it'll inspire you." She should say no. She knew that. But instead, she heard herself say yes. Friday afternoon, Mariana told David she had to meet a client for drinks. The lie came out so easily it scared her. She'd never been a good liar before. She'd always been the honest one, the responsible one. She changed clothes 3 times before leaving the house, finally settling on a dark green dress that made her feel confident and pretty. When was the last time she'd cared what she wore? When was the last time she'd wanted to feel pretty? The gallery was in the Arts District, a neighborhood Mariana rarely visited. Adrian was waiting outside, and when he saw her, his face lit up in a way that made her stomach flip. "You look beautiful," he said simply, and she believed him. They walked through the gallery together, looking at paintings and sculptures. Adrian explained the techniques, the history, the stories behind each piece. His passion was infectious. Mariana found herself seeing art in a completely new way. "What do you think of this one?" Adrian asked, stopping in front of a large abstract painting. Swirls of blue and gold seemed to dance across the canvas. "I think it's about freedom," Mariana said softly. "About breaking free from something." Adrian looked at her with those dark eyes. "Is that what you want? Freedom?" The question hung in the air between them. Mariana didn't know how to answer it. She was married. She had responsibilities. She couldn't just break free, could she? "I think everyone wants that," she finally said. "Don't they?" After the gallery, Adrian suggested they get dinner. "Just a quick bite," he said. Mariana checked her phone. She'd told David she'd be home by 8. It was already 7:30. "I can't," she said, and the disappointment on Adrian's face matched what she felt inside. "Another time, then," he said. "There's always another time, but there shouldn't be another time," Mariana thought as she drove home. She should stop this now before it became something she couldn't control. She was playing with fire, and she knew it. Yet the following week, when Adrian invited her to lunch to discuss a potential art investment for her firm, she said yes again. And the week after that, when he asked her to see his studio apartment where he kept some of his personal collection, she found herself standing in his doorway at 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, calling it a long lunch break. His apartment was everything hers wasn't, filled with color and life and beautiful chaos. Paintings covered every wall. Books were stacked in corners. There was a guitar leaning against a chair, a half-finished chess game on the coffee table. "This is where I come to think," Adrian said, handing her a glass of wine even though it was the middle of the day. "Where I come to remember who I am." Mariana walked slowly through the space, taking it all in. "It's wonderful," she said. "It's so alive. Unlike your life?" Adrian asked gently. The question cut deep because it was true. Her life wasn't alive. It was carefully maintained and properly organized, but it wasn't alive. "I shouldn't be here," Mariana said suddenly, setting down her wine glass. "This is wrong. I'm married, and this is wrong. Why is it wrong?" Adrian moved closer. "We're just talking. 2 friends having a conversation." "Because it doesn't feel like just talking," Mariana said honestly. "You know it doesn't." Adrian was standing right in front of her now, close enough that she could smell his cologne, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "What does it feel like?" he asked softly, and that's when it happened. Mariana didn't know who moved first. Maybe it was her. Maybe it was him. Maybe it was both of them, pulled together by something neither could resist. The moment their lips touched, Mariana's whole world shifted. This was wrong. She knew it was wrong, but it felt like coming alive after being asleep for years. It felt like breathing after drowning. It felt like everything she'd been missing without even knowing it. When they finally pulled apart, Mariana was shaking. "I have to go," she whispered. She left quickly, practically running to her car. Her hands were trembling so badly she could barely get the key in the ignition. What had she done? What had she just done? But even as guilt crashed over her in waves, another part of her mind was already counting the hours until she could see Adrian again. That night, lying next to David in their bed, Mariana couldn't sleep. David snored softly beside her, completely unaware that everything had changed. She stared at the ceiling and thought about the choice she was facing. She could stop this now, confess to David, work on their marriage, forget Adrian existed. That was the right thing to do. The honest thing. The thing the old Mariana would have done without question, or she could keep seeing Adrian. Keep feeling alive and awake and like herself again. Keep living in those stolen moments that felt more real than her entire everyday life. She knew which choice she should make. But as the night stretched on and morning came, Mariana realized with a sinking feeling that she'd already made her decision. She just didn't have the courage to admit it yet. The next day, she bought a second phone, a cheap prepaid one that David would never know about. She gave the number only to Adrian, and with that simple action, Mariana Santos stepped fully into her double life. November arrived with cold winds and gray skies, but Mariana barely noticed the weather. Her world had split into two completely separate realities, and she was living in both of them simultaneously. In one reality, she was still the same Mariana she'd always been. She went to work, reviewed contracts, argued cases. She came home to David, cooked dinner, discussed mundane household matters. She called her parents every Sunday. She smiled at neighbors. From the outside, nothing had changed, but in her other reality, everything had changed. That reality belonged to Adrian, and the hours she stole to be with him. Tuesday and Thursday afternoons became sacred. She invented client meetings and site visits, elaborate lies that came easier each time she told them. She kept her second phone hidden in her car, checking it obsessively whenever David wasn't around. The affair consumed her, not just physically but mentally and emotionally. She thought about Adrian constantly. During meetings, she'd zone out remembering conversations they'd had. At home, she'd find herself smiling at nothing, caught in a memory. Adrian's apartment had become her escape from reality. They spent long afternoons there, talking for hours about everything. He showed her his favorite paintings and explained why they moved him. She told him about cases she was working on, and he actually understood the legal complexities. With him, she didn't have to simplify or explain. He just got it. "You're brilliant," Adrian told her one afternoon as they lay on his couch, her head on his chest. "Does David know how brilliant you are?" "David thinks I work too much," Mariana said. It was true. David had been complaining lately that she was never home, that she seemed distant. He'd suggested they take a vacation, maybe try to reconnect. The guilt was always there, lurking in the background. But it was getting easier to push it aside, to lock it in a room in her mind and forget about it. At least for a few hours at a time. "Tell me something you've never told anyone," Adrian said, running his fingers through her hair. Mariana thought for a moment. "When I was 23, right before law school, I applied to art programs. 3 of them. I got into 2. You did? What happened?" "My father sat me down and showed me statistics about artist income. How many people never make it? How I'd be throwing away my potential. He said I was being childish, chasing dreams instead of building a real future. So you chose law." "So I chose law," Mariana confirmed, "and I told myself I'd made the mature decision. The smart decision. But sometimes I wonder who I would have become if I'd been brave enough to try." Adrian sat up, making her sit up too. He looked at her seriously. "It's not too late, you know. You're 32, not 90. You could still paint. You could still do anything you want. I'm a lawyer. I have a mortgage, responsibilities. You can't just change your whole life because you want to." "Why not?" Adrian challenged. "Who made that rule? People change their lives all the time. They just have to be brave enough to want it." Those conversations planted seeds in Mariana's mind, seeds of possibility. What if she could have a different life? What if she didn't have to stay in the safe, predictable box she'd built for herself? But reality kept intruding. One afternoon, her legal assistant stopped by her office with a stack of files and a concerned look. "Is everything okay, Mrs. Santos?" she asked. "You've been different lately, missing some meetings. I've been covering for you, but I wanted to make sure you're all right." The implication was clear. People were noticing. Mariana forced a smile. "Just dealing with some personal matters. Thank you for covering. I appreciate your discretion." After the assistant left, Mariana sat at her desk with her head in her hands. She was being reckless, sloppy. She needed to be more careful. But being careful meant seeing Adrian less, and she couldn't bear that thought. Elena confronted her, too. They met for lunch one Saturday, and Elena didn't waste time with small talk. "What's going on with you?" Elena demanded. "And don't say nothing. I've known you for 15 years. You're different. I don't know. You're either really happy or really miserable, and I can't tell which." "I'm fine," Mariana said, not meeting her friend's eyes. "Are you seeing him? That guy from the bar, Adrian?" The silence was answer enough. "Oh, Mariana," Elena said sadly. "What are you doing?" "I don't know," Mariana admitted, and it was the most honest thing she'd said in months. "I really don't know. Does David know?" "No, and you can't tell him." "Please, Elena." Elena looked torn. "He's going to find out eventually." These things always come out. And when they do, it's going to destroy him. It's going to destroy everything. I know, Mariana whispered. I know. Then why don't you stop? That was the question, wasn't it? Why didn't she just stop? End it with Adrian. Come clean with David, try to fix her marriage before it was too late? Because she couldn't. It was that simple and that complicated. She was in too deep and she didn't know how to get out. Or maybe she just didn't want to. Tell me this, Elena said. Do you love him, Adrian? Mariana thought about it. Did she love Adrian? Or was she just in love with the way he made her feel? In love with the person she became when she was with him? She honestly didn't know. I don't know what I feel anymore, she said finally. The holiday season approached, making everything more complicated. David wanted to host Thanksgiving. Her parents were coming to stay for a week. Normal life demanded her attention, and Mariana found herself resenting it. Adrian was leaving for a buying trip to Europe in December. 3 weeks, he said. Maybe longer. Come with me, he suggested one evening. They were in his apartment, and he was showing her pictures of the galleries he'd be visiting. Take some vacation time. See Paris in winter. It's magical. I can't just disappear for 3 weeks. I have a job, a husband, a life. Do you? Adrian asked. Or are you just going through the motions of someone else's idea of what your life should be? The question stung because it was true. But what was the alternative? Leave David? Give up everything she'd built? Run away to Europe with a man she'd known for 3 months? I'm not that person, Mariana said. I'm not the kind of person who just abandons their responsibilities. Maybe that's exactly what you need to be, Adrian said. But he didn't push it further. The breaking point came on a Wednesday evening in late November. Mariana had told David she was working late. Instead, she was with Adrian and she'd lost track of time. When she finally checked her phone, she had 17 missed calls from David and a text that said simply, "Where are you?" She drove home with her heart pounding, already rehearsing her excuse. Traffic, dead phone battery, emergency at work. The lies were ready on her tongue. But when she walked into the house, David was standing in the hallway holding something in his hand. It took Mariana a moment to realize what it was. Her second phone. She must have left it in her coat pocket. David must have been looking for something and found it. Her whole carefully constructed house of lies came crashing down in an instant. What is this? David asked. His voice was quiet, which was somehow worse than if he'd been yelling. Mariana opened her mouth, but no words came out. What could she possibly say? David unlocked the phone. She hadn't even put a password on it, she realized, because some part of her had wanted to get caught. Some part of her had wanted this moment to finally arrive so she could stop living this exhausting double life. He read the messages, his face growing paler with each one. Messages from Adrian, sweet messages, flirty messages, messages that made it very clear what their relationship was. When David finally looked up at her, Mariana barely recognized the expression on his face. It was devastation, pure and simple. Who are you? He asked. Because you're not the woman I married. That woman would never... He couldn't even finish the sentence. David, I can explain... Explain? His voice rose now. What is there to explain? You've been having an affair. For months, apparently, while I've been here. Trusting you. Believing you when you said you were working late or meeting clients. I've been a fool. You're not a fool. I'm the one who's wrong. I know that. I know I've hurt you. Hurt me? David laughed, but there was no humor in it. You've destroyed me, Mariana. 7 years of marriage, 7 years of building a life together, and you threw it away for what? Some excitement? Some guy who made you feel special? He was crying now, and seeing David cry broke something in Mariana that she hadn't known could break. I need you to leave, David said. Tonight. Right now. I can't even look at you, David, please. Let's talk about this. There's nothing to talk about. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. Get out. Mariana packed a bag with shaking hands while David sat in the living room staring at nothing. She wanted to say something, to apologize, to make him understand. But there was nothing she could say that would make this better. Nothing that would undo the damage she'd caused. She drove to a hotel in a daze, barely remembering the route. Once in the room, she sat on the bed and finally let herself cry. Not just for David, but for everything. For the life she'd destroyed, for the person she'd become, for the choices that had led her to this moment. She picked up her phone to call Adrian, then stopped. What would she even say? That it was over? That they'd been caught? That now they could be together for real? But suddenly, in the stark loneliness of that hotel room, she wasn't sure she even wanted that. The days following the revelation felt like moving through thick fog. Mariana checked into a long-term hotel suite and went through the motions of living without really being present. She called in sick to work for the first time in 5 years. She ignored calls from her parents, who David had apparently told everything. She couldn't face anyone's disappointment or judgment. Not yet. Adrian called her constantly. She finally answered on the third day. "I heard," he said. His voice was gentle, concerned. "Come over. Let me take care of you." She went. Where else did she have to go? But the moment she walked into his apartment, something felt different. The space that had felt like sanctuary now felt like a stranger's home. Adrian tried to comfort her, but his touch felt wrong somehow. "This could be good," Adrian said as they sat on his couch. "I know it doesn't feel like it now, but maybe this was what needed to happen. Now you're free. We can be together for real." Mariana looked at him, really looked at him. Maybe for the first time without the haze of excitement and secrecy. "What does that mean? Be together for real? We could travel. You've always wanted to see the world. We could go to Paris like I suggested. Or Tokyo. Anywhere you want. I have a job, Adrian. A career. I can't just wander around the world. That's why not. People change careers all the time. You said yourself you never really wanted to be a lawyer. That was just talk. I can't actually. I mean, I have bills. A mortgage, responsibilities." Adrian pulled back slightly. "You're still thinking like the old Mariana. The one who let other people define her life. I thought you wanted something different." "I did. I do. I don't know what I want anymore." Over the next week, that feeling only grew stronger. Adrian suggested she move in with him. "Just temporarily," he said. "Until you figure things out." But the idea of moving from one man's home directly into another's made her stomach turn. She started to notice things about Adrian she'd overlooked before. The way he talked about his freedom but seemed to expect her to be available whenever he wanted. The way he dismissed her concerns about her career as just a job, when it was something she'd worked years to build. The way he never asked about how she was dealing with the devastation she'd caused, only about when they could be together. Her legal assistant called her. "Mrs. Santos, I hate to bother you while you're sick, but there are some questions about the Morrison case. Also, there's been some talk around the office. I thought you should know. The affair was becoming office gossip." Of course it was. Mariana wanted to curl up and disappear. Her reputation, something she'd worked so hard to build, was crumbling. Professional and personal disaster all at once. She forced herself to return to work the following Monday. Walking through the office felt like running a gauntlet. People's eyes followed her. Conversations stopped when she entered rooms. Her supervisor called her into his office. "We need to talk about your recent absences and about maintaining professional standards," he said carefully. "This is a difficult situation, and we want to support you. But we also need to ensure that personal matters don't impact your work or the firm's reputation." The message was clear. Get yourself together, or there would be consequences. That evening, Adrian called to ask if she wanted to have dinner. She said she couldn't. She had work to catch up on. He sighed with frustration. "You're always working. That's the whole problem with your life. You need to learn to prioritize what matters." "My work does matter," Mariana snapped. "Just because you can afford to be irresponsible doesn't mean everyone can." There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. "Irresponsible? Is that what you think of me?" "That's not what I meant. I think you need to figure out what you actually want, Mariana. Because right now it seems like you want to go back to your safe little life, and we both know that's not possible anymore." He was right. David had filed for separation. The divorce papers would be coming soon. Her parents had called her once, and the conversation had been painfully short. "We're disappointed," her mother had said, and then neither of them seemed to know what else to say. Mariana had burned every bridge, destroyed every relationship, and for what? To be with Adrian? But the more time she spent with him outside of their secret bubble, the more she realized their connection had been built on fantasy, not reality. They'd never had to deal with real life together. They'd never argued about bills or discussed career goals or made compromises. They'd existed in stolen moments where everything was intense and exciting because it was forbidden. But what happened when it wasn't forbidden anymore? when it was just regular life with a different person? She started seeing a therapist, Dr. Chen, 3 times a week. The first session, she could barely speak through her tears. "I've ruined everything," she said. "My marriage, my reputation, my relationship with my parents. And for what? For a man I'm not even sure I actually love." "Let's talk about that," Dr. Chen said gently. "What made you pursue this relationship in the first place?" Over the following weeks, Mariana began to untangle the mess of her thoughts and feelings. It wasn't really about Adrian, she started to realize. It was about the life she'd been living. The way she'd followed everyone else's rules and expectations until she'd lost sight of who she actually was. "I became the person everyone wanted me to be," she told Dr. Chen. "The good daughter, the successful lawyer, the responsible wife. But I forgot to be myself. And then Adrian came along and made me feel alive again, and I confused that feeling with love. And now I realize I used him as an escape instead of actually dealing with my life. I was unhappy, and instead of trying to fix things or make real changes, I had an affair. I hurt David, who never deserved any of this. And I didn't even do it for the right reasons." The guilt was overwhelming. Some days Mariana couldn't get out of bed. The weight of what she'd done pressed down on her like a physical thing. She'd betrayed someone who loved her, someone who trusted her, and she could never take that back. She ran into David once at the grocery store. He was with a lawyer friend, probably discussing the divorce. When he saw her, he looked away immediately and steered his cart in the opposite direction. That small gesture hurt more than if he'd yelled at her. He couldn't even look at her. She'd made herself invisible to him. Adrian grew more distant too. She'd been pulling away and he'd noticed. When she canceled plans for the 3rd time in a row, he showed up at her hotel room. "What's going on with us?" he demanded. "Ever since David found out, you've been different, distant." "Maybe I need time to process everything that's happened," Mariana said. "Or maybe you regret it. Maybe you wish you'd never met me." Mariana looked at him standing in her doorway and realized he was right. Not about regretting meeting him exactly, but regretting the choices she'd made. Regretting the way she'd handled everything. "I think we need to take a break," she said quietly. "A break?" "Mariana, I've been waiting for you. I've been patient while you dealt with your marriage ending, but I'm not going to wait forever. I'm not asking you to wait. I'm saying I need to figure out who I am without being anyone's wife or anyone's secret. I need to be alone." Adrian stared at her for a long moment. "You're making a mistake. But if that's what you want..." He turned and left without another word. 2 days later, she saw on social media that he was in Barcelona. No goodbye. No last conversation. Just gone. And the strangest thing was, Mariana felt relieved. She was finally truly alone. No husband. No secret relationship. Just herself, broken and lost, but at least honest for the first time in months. The divorce proceedings began. David was fair, more fair than she deserved. He didn't try to punish her financially. He just wanted it over with. Her position at the firm was quietly shifted to a consulting role, which was corporate speak for being pushed aside. Her career trajectory, once so promising, had stalled. Maybe permanently. She'd lost everything. Her marriage. Her reputation. Her lover. Her standing in the community. Everything she'd built over 32 years, destroyed in a matter of months. And somehow, in the wreckage of her life, Mariana had to figure out how to become a person she could live with. 6 months after that night at the Velvet Room, Mariana sat in her new apartment and took stock of her life. It was a 1-bedroom place on the other side of town, smaller and quieter than the house she'd shared with David. The furniture was minimal. She'd left almost everything behind, taking only what was truly hers. The apartment felt empty, but also peaceful in a way she hadn't expected. There were no memories here. No ghosts of who she used to pretend to be. The divorce was finalized in March. Mariana sat in the lawyer's office and signed her name over and over while David sat across from her, looking anywhere but at her face. When it was done, he stood up immediately. "David," she said, and he paused. "I know saying sorry doesn't fix anything, but I am sorry. For all of it. You deserve so much better." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw that some of the anger had faded from his eyes. "What remained was just sadness. I know you are," he said. "I hope you find whatever you were looking for, Mariana. I really do." And then he left. It was the kindest thing he could have said. and it broke her heart all over again. Her consulting role at the firm eventually ended. "It's not working out," her supervisor said, and they both knew what he really meant. She'd become a liability, someone who brought whispers and judgment wherever she went. For the first time in her adult life, Mariana Santos didn't have a career to define her. In therapy, Dr. Chen helped her understand that losing everything might actually be the opportunity she needed. "You've spent your whole life building a version of yourself that other people would approve of," Dr. Chen said. "Your parents wanted you to be a lawyer. David wanted you to be a traditional wife. You wanted to be seen as successful and responsible. But what do you want just for yourself?" It was a simple question with no simple answer. Mariana had to sit with it for weeks, really thinking about what made her happy when she wasn't trying to impress anyone or meet anyone's expectations. The answer surprised her. She wanted to paint. It seemed foolish at first. She was 33 years old, unemployed, divorced, with no art training beyond high school classes. But she bought supplies anyway, cheap ones from a craft store because she couldn't afford expensive materials anymore. She was terrible at first. Her paintings looked like what they were, the work of someone who hadn't touched a brush in over a decade. But slowly, as weeks turned into months, she improved. More importantly, she enjoyed it. For a few hours each day, she could lose herself in color and form and forget about everything else. She joined a support group for people recovering from their own mistakes. It met in a church basement on Thursday evenings, and at first Mariana felt like an imposter. These were people dealing with addiction, with criminal records, with problems that seemed so much bigger than hers. But as she listened to their stories, she realized they were all fighting the same battle. They'd all made choices that hurt people. They'd all lost things they couldn't get back. They were all trying to figure out how to live with themselves and move forward. "The hardest part," one woman named Patricia said during a meeting, "is accepting that you can't undo what you did. You can't go back and make different choices. You can only decide who you're going to be from this moment forward." Mariana thought about that a lot. She couldn't undo the affair, couldn't unhurt David, couldn't erase the lies or the betrayal. Those things were part of her story now, permanently written in ink. But she could decide what came next. She got a job as a paralegal at a smaller firm. It was a huge step down from where she'd been, but it paid the bills and kept her in the legal field. Her supervisor, an older woman named Ruth, knew about Mariana's past. "Everyone makes mistakes," Ruth said simply. "What matters is what you do after. Do good work, be honest, and prove that you've learned something. That's all anyone can ask." Mariana threw herself into being reliable. She showed up early, stayed late when needed, and never cut corners. Slowly, she started to rebuild something like a reputation, even if it would never be what it once was. She ran into Elena at a coffee shop one Saturday morning. They hadn't spoken since everything fell apart. Elena looked uncomfortable when she spotted Mariana, like she might pretend not to see her. "Elena," Mariana called out. "It's okay. You don't have to talk to me if you don't want to." Elena hesitated, then came over to Mariana's table. "How are you?" she asked carefully. "Honestly, some days are okay, some days are terrible, but I'm dealing with it." They talked for a few minutes, awkward at first, then more naturally. Elena told her about her life, and Mariana realized how much she'd missed having a friend. "I'm sorry," Mariana said, "for dragging you into my mess, for not listening when you tried to warn me. I'm sorry I couldn't help you more," Elena replied. I didn't know what to do. Nobody did, including me." They started meeting for coffee every few weeks after that. The friendship wasn't what it used to be, but it was something. A small connection in Mariana's otherwise solitary life. 1 year after the affair ended, Mariana saw David at a coffee shop. He was with a woman. They were laughing together, comfortable in a way Mariana remembered from the early days of her marriage. The woman said something, and David smiled, really smiled, with genuine warmth. Mariana's first instinct was to leave before he saw her. But she stopped herself. She was done running from uncomfortable moments. David noticed her then. Their eyes met across the coffee shop. For a second, neither of them moved. Then Mariana gave him a small nod, and David nodded back. It wasn't forgiveness, exactly. But maybe it was acknowledgement. They'd both survived. They were both moving forward. Mariana left before they could have an awkward conversation, but she felt something lift from her chest. A weight she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. David was okay. He was healing. He'd found someone new who made him smile. She hadn't destroyed him forever. He was going to be okay. In her apartment that evening, Mariana worked on a painting. She'd started taking an evening class at the community center, and her instructor said she showed real potential. The painting was of a bird in a cage with the door open, unsure whether to fly out or stay where it was safe. It's about choices, she'd explained to her class, about how sometimes the scariest thing is freedom. Because being free means you're responsible for your own life. You can't blame anyone else for where you end up. Her phone buzzed. A text from Elena. Proud of you. Keep going. Mariana smiled. She was keeping going. Some days it felt impossible. The shame still hit her at random moments, washing over her like a wave. She'd be at the grocery store or on the bus, and suddenly remember some specific lie she'd told David, some moment of betrayal, and feel sick with guilt. But she was learning to sit with those feelings instead of running from them. They were part of her now, part of her story. She'd done those things. She'd hurt people, and she had to carry that knowledge forward. What she didn't have to do was let it define her entire existence. 2 years after everything fell apart, Mariana had her first art showing at a small local gallery. Nothing fancy, just a corner where they displayed work from their community classes. But it was something. It was hers. She'd invited Elena, Ruth from work, a few people from her support group. To her surprise, they all came. Standing in front of her paintings, Mariana felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Not pride exactly, because she was still learning to be comfortable with pride, but satisfaction. She'd created something honest, something that came from who she truly was, not who she thought she should be. These are beautiful, Ruth said, studying a painting of a woman standing at a crossroads. They're honest. You can see the struggle in them, but also hope. That's what I was going for, Mariana said. I wanted to paint the truth, even when it's complicated. She never heard from Adrian again. Occasionally she wondered what happened to him, if he ever thought about her. But mostly she didn't. He'd been a catalyst, not a destination. A way for her to blow up a life she'd been unhappy with, rather than doing the harder work of actually changing. On her 35th birthday, Mariana treated herself to dinner at a nice restaurant. She sat alone reading a book, enjoying her meal. A man at the bar smiled at her, and for a moment she felt that old flutter of excitement. Then she thought about the Velvet Room, about Adrian, about all the destruction that came from following that flutter without thinking about the consequences. She smiled politely back at the man and returned to her book. She was learning, slowly and painfully, that excitement wasn't the same as happiness. That intensity wasn't the same as love. That breaking something wasn't the same as fixing what was wrong. Real change, she'd discovered, was much quieter than she'd imagined. It happened in small decisions made every day, to be honest instead of lying, to face problems instead of running, to build something genuine instead of performing for others. The affair and its aftermath had been the most painful experience of Mariana's life. She'd lost her marriage, her career trajectory, her reputation, and her sense of who she was. She'd hurt people who didn't deserve it. She'd become someone she barely recognized. But in the rubble of all that destruction, she'd found something unexpected. She'd found herself. Not the successful lawyer version or the perfect wife version or the exciting affair version. Just Mariana. Flawed, complicated,